Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bookish Road Trip Roadshow. I am Lee Bukowski. I am the author of, I want this not to be blurry, I'm the author of A Week of Warm Weather. Can you see that? It's blurry.
A little blurry.
It's okay. You've seen it a million times. The author of A Week of Warm Weather. Hope you'll check that out. And I'm very, very excited. This is my second episode as host of the Bookish Road Trip Roadshow. And our theme today is just so fun. It's The Struggle is Real, Mom Life in Books. And I really encourage all of you watching, to make comments, to ask questions. I think this is going to be a really, really fun conversation. One programming note, if you have not already, allow StreamYard access to your Facebook name. Okay, so otherwise, if you comment or ask a question, you will only come up as Facebook user. And if you don't feel like doing that, you can just put your name at the beginning of your comment, and then we'll know who you are. We want to know who's joining us. Okay, I am thrilled to introduce my panel today. We have Lisa Rowe. She is the author of Welcome to the Neighborhood. Julie Valerie. She's the author of Holly Banks, Full of Angst, and The Peculiar Fate of Holly Banks. Emma Murray, author of the trilogy Time Out, The Juggle, and Winging It. Stephanie Eding, author of The Unplanned Life of Josie, Hale. And Annie Cathryn, author of The Friendship Breakup, which just came out this month. Congratulations. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't do this.
At least yours weren't blurry, so you know.
Starting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, you're all good. So this is such a great topic. This is going to be so much fun. So mom-com, right? What a great. So it's a thing. It's a genre. And so I think the first thing we want to talk about, we're talking about all things relating to mom life, just really kind of navigating that, in the modern world, all things having to do with, the relationships and the situations that women, especially moms, kind of find ourselves in. But you guys do it so well with comedy, because let's face it, you really need a sense of humor to be a mom. So I think it's just such a great genre, and I can't wait to hear about all of your work. So I think that the first question we should start with, let's start with you, Lisa. So what really got you into writing mom-com?
Okay, so in this group, I am a little bit different in that I am past the raising kids stage. I am actually an empty nester at this point. So I had 25 years of stay-at-home momming before I actually wrote Welcome to the Neighborhood. And I think why I wrote the mom-com was because I had some personal demons I needed to exercise. And I now have some distance from it, my kids being grown, so that I could write the story about Ginny Miller, who is, going through the angst of raising a tween in a new neighborhood, which is basically the concept of my book. And so I think I wanted to give Ginny a chance to redo a lot of the things that I did, and possibly not well. So it was a redemption arc for me, I guess.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting and so reflective on, as you said, and I love that we're all kind of in different stages of motherhood, and in your books, the characters are in different stages of motherhood. Right. So Emma, how about you? Tell us about what is it that made you go and dive into mom-com?
Well, kind of similar to Lisa, we're at different stages of motherhood. So my books are more to do with early motherhood and then the primary school years. And I think quite like Lisa, I find it very cathartic. I found that the whole experience of being a new mum extremely frustrating, and I was annoyed about the lack of authenticity from other mums, and the fact that nobody seemed really honest about the struggle, and that people would cover up, and there were people that pretended that their newborn slept through the night when everyone knew that that was all right. So I really just wanted to get it out of my system. So that my first book, Time Out, it's a rant basically against all the people that can't just admit that you're feeling like rubbish, and this morning you drag yourself out of bed and everyone looks like, if they didn't coat themselves in makeup, then they would look like they've been dragged from a ditch. And if everyone just admitted the fact that no one knew what they were doing, then we'd all be a more cohesive unit.
Yes.
So I ended up writing a rant, and then but the second and third book became slightly more mellow after that. But so that was the reason.
I love that, because I think we've all, when you have a new baby and you're just absolutely out of your mind, but there's always that one mom who's like, oh, I don't understand why you find it stressful. Everything's wonderful. Lies, all lies.
Yeah.
Thanks. Julie, how about you?
So kind of taking off what Emma was just saying, I felt that I wanted to write a character that was also internalizing and punishing herself for all of those screw ups that she was doing during the day. Because motherhood can be really challenging, because you're trying to execute, so much for so many, and you're so worried, and the stakes feel so high, and you really want to do a great job. And then when you inevitably screw something up, or the day goes completely upside down, I think sometimes women, at least myself, can be really hard on themselves.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to look at a character that was internalizing a lot of this and try to speak to the message of self-acceptance, give yourself a break. And I wanted to create a character that other moms could relate to and potentially want to hang out with, because I think I would probably have a good time if I had somebody like Holly Banks around me to laugh at all of the insanity and of the whole thing, and to just kind of, have a glass of wine and just talk each other off the ledge, and remind ourselves that that we're okay, and we're trying our best, and we should go easy on ourselves.
Yeah, that's so and it's so real. And it really does build on what Emma was saying. But I think that's a really great point, to create a character somebody would want to hang out with, and just really realize that we're all kind of going through those same things, even if some people pretend we're not. Stephanie, in your book, you deal with impending motherhood so I think that's really interesting too. So why mom-com? Why did you choose this genre?
So when I first started writing mom-com, this would be my first of the mom-com books. My others, I'd been doing young adult, and when I kind of switched over, my kids were real young at that time. I only had the 2. I have 3 now. And so, I was trying to think of a story idea, and I was like, I loved everything about the pregnancy, and just the wild and crazy times that brought, and, the hormonal swings that come with it. And so, I just saw the comedy in that the whole time. And so what kind of got me going in this story is, Josie's life's falling apart. So she goes back to her hometown, and, you don't want to be back in your hometown around everybody that, when your life's falling apart, especially when you're pregnant with your ex's baby. So just building on that, and just how, the whole goal is to get her life together before this baby comes. So, the starting out as a young mother, trying to put pieces together, it all just came way too easily, because I think that's all what we're trying to do, is just get ourselves together for our kids.
Absolutely. And your title, yes, I absolutely love your title too, The Unplanned Life of Joe. I think that's so great, The Unplanned Life. Annie, how about you? Now you're a little, yours, I think which is what I love about your book, The Friendship Breakup, deals, of course, with moms, but, kind of the mean or sort of the mean moms and mean girls aspect.
Yes. So when I wrote my book, my daughter was 7, and the character Maya, the daughter, is also 7 in the book. So I was writing the book as I was going through some of this stuff with her. And like others have said, if I didn't write it as comedy and in funny, I would be crying all day long. It was definitely cathartic for me. And the other thing is, I wanted to bring in the mom friendships, because I feel like these mothers that were also friends of mine in real life, but then I made some characters, but they're still fictional, that other moms really get you through the tough times of motherhood. And that is a main theme in The Friendship Breakup. Now, Fallon, the main character, gets ghosted by these friends, and that is painful as well. But before that, the moms really picked her up, and she felt less alone as she was going through motherhood. And I think that topic is very important, and one that's not really touched on a lot in books.
That's a great point. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how it's a lot like the author community, right? So we all help each other, in this industry, which can be very challenging. And I think you're exactly right. Like moms can do that for each other and should do that for each other. So of course we have the ones who don't, but I think that's great. So I think building on that a little bit, I think in this genre, in mom lit, mom com, concern for children really is a common theme. And so how does that raise the stakes in your writing? Annie, why don't you go ahead and build, because you just were talking, and I think we can kind of build on that.
So in my book, the daughter is being bullied as well as the mom is being bullied and ghosted. So if you have the mother-daughter relationship where the daughter is going through something as well as the mother, then it does raise the stakes and it makes for a more interesting story. And the mother tries to jump in and fix everything, and it adds just another layer of complexity and builds in that mama bear aspect of mothering. And so, yeah, I wanted my characters to be going through something similar together, and how they would work it out in the end.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And Stephanie, your character is thinking about, what raises the stakes is, her life is falling apart, but she's pregnant. So again, how does that play into that kind of the concern for the children? How did that play into your writing?
Yeah, so Josie is just right now she's loses her home when she splits with her husband. She has to move back in with her mom, and so you've kind of got that generational. This is mother-daughter lifestyle, and then Josie trying to she's got to find a job. She moves back in with her former crush from high school and her former best friend Kevin. So everything is just not how she had planned it. She wanted to have that nice. She wanted the father present. He's not present. So now she's got the custody stuff coming up, and she's got to prove to the judge that she can handle all of this, things like that. So like the stakes are pretty high in that, she's only got the 9 months to get herself together before this baby enters the world. And she really wants to, it's not easy to get all the ducks in a row in such a short time span when you're a mom.
No, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting because, there's nothing like, hey, I'm going to have a baby, so I really need to get it together, but it's not a lot of time. So that's great. Julie, how about you in your books?
So in my book, I also focus on milestones and how the milestones can be difficult in motherhood. Like for Holly, her daughter Ella is starting kindergarten the same week that they're moving to a new town, and the house is still in boxes. So Holly is transitioning to a whole new world, whole new town, meeting a lot of very intense, high octane moms, and her daughter is also transitioning. So she's a little unstable because what would have been normal and stable in her life, everything is upside down. So it kind of throws her off a little bit. I also have a relationship with her mother that plays out. So kind of 3 generations of women. When Holly was her daughter's age, when Holly was 5, her parents went through a very difficult time and her mother kind of unraveled. So she's entering the kindergarten milestone with her daughter being triggered a lot with memories of what her kindergarten year was like, and a year that was very difficult for her mother. And part of Holly's journey of forgiving herself for things that take place during the first week of kindergarten is also coming to terms with what was going on with her own mother's life and forgiving her own mother. So the kind of the forgiveness of things that take place that are sometimes unfortunate in motherhood. So the stakes are really high because for Holly as the central character, she's needing to effortlessly transition her daughter into kindergarten, and her daughter is not having it. And there's a very public display of very strong emotions by her daughter right in front of the school. So every time Holly turns around just trying to get through the day, something else is happening. And she's also worrying about her daughter while also processing things that happened with her mother. And of course, then her mother shows up. And so then the mother is on the page and in the town with her. So there's just a lot coming at her. So the stakes of sometimes just getting through a day can be really high for mothers because some days in parenthood, some days are just crazy and you just want to get through the day and get through the week. But because I think there's such intense love for your family members, the stakes can be really high because you're very emotionally invested in having things go well for your family and for yourself. And so much of your identity can sometimes be at stake if you screw up at something in motherhood. You feel really bad.
Yes, that's true. And it's always, I think for moms, I know for me, and I think many, many moms, it's always that feeling of somebody else is doing it better.
Yes.
You know, so
what doing it better. Yeah.
So what's wrong with me? Somebody else seems to be doing it better.
Right.
But yeah, so that's definitely a thing. Emma, how about you? Talk a little bit about that. You know, the stakes being high based on the concern for children.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to everything that Julie was saying in terms of Holly Banks and everything that she's going through. And I love Julie's book so much. But we always said that Holly and Saoirse, the lead character in my books, would probably be really good pals. So they're quite similar. But yeah, similarly, Saoirse has a lot to cope with. She has one daughter, and the 3 books sort of follow that sort of development. So it starts in the early years and then progresses to sort of primary school age. And then in the 3rd book, the whole family is relocated to New York, where the thread of the character goes from the storyline sort of follows both Saoirse and her daughter Anna, and deals with kind of their, you know, very sort of overlapping concerns in recreating their lives in a way from where they've moved from in London, and trying to create a sense of community in a new place, and also dealing with, you know, different sort of cultural differences and making new friends. And Saoirse had her tribe back in London, and she just settled and she just found her confidence, and she was quite clear that she didn't want, you know, to deal with the judgmental mums anymore, called the organics, because they just judge everybody for giving their kids unhealthy snacks at the school gate. And she sort of had cleared her head of that, and then suddenly she's starting all over again. And of course, that anxiety then is sort of reflected in her daughter, who's, you know, at this stage, whatever, 5, but still has to leave all her friends behind, start a new school. So the stakes are high from an emotional perspective there. And of course, anything to do with kids is emotional, you know, no matter what, it's pure emotion. And that's why, you know, everything is so heightened for both characters. So
yeah, and Lisa, in your book, Ginny her concern is Harry, her daughter, and it really raises the stakes for her in her new situation, moving with her young daughter. And so maybe you can speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So piggybacking on what Emma said, my story is also a new girl on the block type story. And the difference is, or not the difference, but what happens in my book is that Ginny, the mom, feels very strongly about her value set and is not swayed by it, despite being on a street with a lot of sort of New Jersey housewife types who could not be more different than her. But one of the issues is that her daughter, Harry, who is sort of a vulnerable character, does become embroiled with these sort of mean girls and is affected by them. And Ginny watches it. You know, she watches her daughter change in a way that she doesn't feel matches with the values that she was brought up with. Ginny's an artist. They come from an artist community. They come from a much more, I guess, down to earth, sort of less economically, you know, high economic area. And so it's a clash. You know, she wants her daughter to fit in, but she doesn't like the way she's fitting in. And so that's a conflict for Ginny, watching this unfold in front of her, until it gets to a point where she's got to make a decision. And the whole sort of theme of the book is about standing up for yourself and staying true to yourself and authentic to your values. So that's a lot. And, you know, and as mothers, we feel like whether it's true or not, we kind of are creating these kids like as if they're works of art, like we're molding them, and when they don't exactly mold the way we want them to, and the vision that we had for them, it's frustrating. Like Julie said, it's a reflection of what we've done, what are we doing wrong, and how are we failing everybody, and what is our identity if we can't even turn our kids into these little creatures that we want them to be. So there's a lot of conflict in that. And I brought in the humor in my book because that deflects these kind of very, I think, difficult subject matters about bullying, and in my case, there's some issues with body image, and at a very young age, which is unfortunately prevalent in a lot of these situations. So it's a lot of a value system clash kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think so. Michelle Wade, thank you for joining us, is saying all these books sound fun and important reads because they let us know that we're all doing just fine, which I think a lot of you, I think that's where, even though you insert humor and your books are humorous and it's so great, but really you're hitting on the things that all of you are talking about, that are so important, that are part of being moms. But you're doing it in a very real way. So let's talk about humor. You all did such a great job of inserting humor into your books, and so why is that important? And also, is it difficult? Do you feel to write humor? Julie, why don't you start?
So, I did a deep dive into the craft of humor and studied stand-up, wordplay, jokes, physical humor, gags, knock-knock jokes. I studied every little device of humor and tried to employ as many as I could in the book. I've often thought about like potentially isolating where they are and then maybe writing a supplement or something to anybody who might be looking at humor. And whether or not I pulled it off on the page, I think depends on the reader, because just like watching stand-up, if you're in the audience, some people will laugh, others won't. And so a lot of it is a personal reaction that the reader would have. But I think that there's something really interesting about humor, is that there's often a kernel of pain inside of jokes or inside of humor. And it is definitely a coping mechanism. So like when, instead of crying, just, crack a joke, or it often is light and funny. And I think people might make blanket judgments about humor and just think that it's light. But often it comes from a place of pain, to be able to turn life and satire and looking at what's not right in the world, and perhaps poking fun of it through satire and through humor as a way of elevating thoughts and things that you want to share with others. So I definitely think it's important to realize that there's a little bit of pain inside every comic and inside of all the jokes, but that there are also different types of humor that you can employ when you're doing your work. When I wrote the first draft of the first book, it was in second person point of view, and then I layered in another character and turned it into first person point of view, and then I turned it into third person, and I went from past tense to present tense, and the humor writing and the jokes changed with every version, because so much of humor depends on language. So if you're reading it and the rhythm is slightly thrown off because the verbs are now past tense when they were present tense, it completely changes the humor. And so there was not just the rewriting of the words in the new points of view and in past tense, present tense, but you had to also look at the humor and whether or not it was working as a language component, whether the beats were correct, whether you could tell the joke or tell the humor or tell the funny scene from first person versus third person point of view. So I would say that humor certainly changes based on lots of constructs of the craft of fiction, and it all has to somehow be working. And it's one thing to tell a story, and it's a whole nother thing to tell a story with humor, because you have to almost bring a whole nother layer to the what you're creating if you're going to also try to tell it through the device of humor.
That is so true. And I think it's one of the things that makes your books and this genre so endearing, is that we do know as moms, there's, behind a lot of the humor, there's pain, and it comes from that. And I know from personal experience, I joke around. I mean, I think it's how I've survived, is having a sense of humor. My book actually it's not mom-com, but it deals with 3 generations of motherhood. And there is a lot, again, I'm a different genre. There's a lot of pain there. Obviously there's some lighthearted things, but I think that really is one of the things that makes your writing so endearing, is that insertion of humor, knowing that behind it, in real life, in the situations that moms go through, there's a lot of pain. So that's such a great point, Julie. Barbara Connery is saying, being a mom is the hardest job ever. Barbara and I are having lunch tomorrow, and if any gamblers out there, if you want to bet on whether or not we have a glass of wine with lunch, I think Vegas. I think the odds are in our favor. Stephanie, what do you think there?
So it's actually kind of amusing that when I first started writing this book, I meant it to be a little more of an emotional, a little deeper. It was not going to be comedic in any way. And when I turned it over to my first editors, they're like, okay, we laughed way too much for this to be a serious book. So this really showed me a lot about how I see the world. And so, it's, like Julie said, if you don't laugh, you'll cry sometimes in the whole journey of life, but especially through motherhood. And so I think a lot of the comedy, Josie can kind of laugh at herself and some of the changes that she's going through. But also I think a lot of the comedy elements come from the supporting characters and some of her friends that are surrounding her and lifting her up during this time. I think that's so important as, we struggle through some of these difficult things, that we have these support systems that can keep us seeing the funny side of life.
That is so fascinating that you did not intend for the humor, that for it to come across as humorous. And I think you're right, that just really shows your perspective and how you look at this and getting through it. And I think that so many people will certainly relate to that. Annie, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. Laughter gets you through some tough times, and motherhood is tough. So, yeah, my mom-com, it was meant to be funny, and I was just hoping it was received that way. I did not do any research like Julie did, but now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should for my second book. The experiences that I had gone through with my daughter, they just were like, when looking back, not going through them, but when looking back, you're like, oh my gosh, that is hilarious. I can't even believe I survived some of this stuff. And so I wanted my character to go through similar situations and let other moms who have also been through something similar, that, yeah, it's okay to laugh. Okay, we went through this, we survived. And the other thing, to make sure that I was hitting the funny parts, I had my husband read some parts, I had my mother read some parts, and I would watch them. And I'm waiting for them to laugh at the right moment. And when they did, then I was like, okay, I know I'm on to something here. But yeah, it's almost like you can't create it in a vacuum. You have to see how it's received, whether it's Stephanie's editor or whether it's Julie's research, or if it's somebody close to you reading it, thinking and watching their reactions. So
yeah, a great point. That's a great point. You really do have to see how your work is received by others. And that's so funny, because when they laugh at the right moment, you're like, yes, I nailed it. That's awesome.
That feeling,
and looking back, like you said, not even maybe going through it, but when you look back at things, you really, I think, do see the comedy in it. Yes. Lisa, how about you? The humor, did you find it difficult? Why? Because you have a lot of humor in your book.
Well, thank you, because I feel terrible because I didn't do any research, and I really actually just wrote my voice, which I think is something, like, literally when you have a conversation with me, and some guys on this panel will know that, like, I basically talk the same way I write. So it either comes down on the page or it doesn't. And so it's a great relief to me sometimes when I go to readings and I'm reading my book, my voice is shaking because I'm nervous and and I'm stumbling over words, and I hear somebody like snort through their nose. The greatest sound in the world, a nose snort. And so, there's that. I mean, it's just how I don't know if I could write a book that was serious, because I just don't think I have it in me. But I do, Julie was talking about, the point of views and the tense and stuff like that. I have found that writing first person present tense does give me the opportunity to add my voice in a way that I guess comes out funny, because I think it's just, maybe I'm just closer to putting myself into my character's shoes, and maybe that's how it works. But I also wanted to just share, because everybody has really touched on so much of what I think about writing humor, which is hard, by the way, still, is that when I first decided to write my very first book, Welcome to the Neighborhood is actually my fourth manuscript, first published book. I had been reading a lot of serious, sad books. Somebody has cancer, somebody got hit by a car, somebody's kid is kidnapped. And while there is definitely a place for all of those books, those really tense, emotional books, I was actually taking them like with me during the day. My husband would say to me, stop reading those books because you're so depressed. He'd close the book and he'd walk away because it had such an impact on me. So I consciously kind of made that decision to write a book that, even if I was touching on hard subjects, and there are quite a few tough subjects in my book, I would do it in a lighter way, because I really, bottom line, wanted to write a book that entertained people. We're still in the communications entertainment business here, and that's important for me to do. So hopefully I accomplished it.
Yeah, and you do get invested in the characters. I can really appreciate that. And again, you can start to feel like these things are happening to people.
Yeah.
But I can attest that your writing and your voice are one and the same, and I think that's wonderful. People say that about me. My book is it's a heavier. It has those heavier topics and not as much comedy. But I think that many people have told me that they hear my voice coming through. Emma, so your titles alone are enough to order all three of those books, because if you wanted to sum up motherhood, winging it and juggling, and it just a timeout. So what do you think about writing with humor?
Yeah, I don't think I could write in any other way. I did sort of toy with trying to be a serious writer, and then like Stephanie, it's like, forget it. I was kind of making jokes do you know what I mean? Like kind of making a mockery of my own self. So I thought, okay, well, that's not the way to do this. And then I just started just writing, as I said, sort of ranting, certainly for the first book. And my goal really was to comfort other people, and provide a sense of comfort for people who I was sure they're out there, and I knew a lot of people who felt the same way as me, to say you're not the only one. Actually, that was the original title of Time Out. Not the only one. And just to tell people that we're all in the same boat, and no one knows what they're doing, and we're all equally flailing and struggling, and certainly in the early stages, and well, probably throughout. Still teenagers to come. But and that was really important to me. But it was also really important to add depth to that humor, much like everyone else here has done, and to raise issues that women go through and that are not spoken about very often. And I feel like the dialogue is opening a bit more now. But I felt like dealing with issues like, difficulties with breastfeeding or miscarriage or IVF, and I felt like when you sort of describe those issues, or through those issues, through certain characters, through in a safe environment where, even though those subjects themselves aren't funny, there has been humor in the story that makes them more acceptable, and hopefully relatable to people who have been going through the same thing. And I think that's the wonderful thing about comedy, is that it's a conduit for more serious things. And Julie says, there's always an element of pain or some kind of maybe trauma or history behind all the jokes, and I think sort of presenting them in a safe way makes them more easily, it's easier to talk about difficult topics.
It's such a great point. Humor, it's so true that humor really is a conduit. There are a lot of, and I think you're right, Emma. I think we're doing much better as a society with having conversations and talking about things that are uncomfortable. But yeah, so humor really is, I think that's such an important element in your work. So I think one of the things that I know people always ask, they think that you are the main character in your book, and they are all characters in your book. You've probably had the situation. I've had many people text me, is this so-and-so? Is this me? No, it's not any of you. Read the book. But so the question I have for you is, are there any similarities between you and your main character? And I know we talked a little bit about your voices coming through. I can tell anyone who's listening or who will watch this, you are all such authentic people. I was so excited to do this because you are just so much of a what you see is what you get, and it's delightful. And it's, I knew this was just going to be a conversation. But Stephanie, let's start with you. Are there any similarities between Stephanie and Josie?
Well, kind of like what Lisa said, I write how I speak. And so, yeah, if you read Josie, I am Josie. Yes. Just, her personality, how she handles situations. That's how I would handle situations. I can't say I've ever been in the same situation as her, aside from having experienced pregnancy. And I'd say one of the main things that I have in common with her is there is a lot of food mentioned in this story. She's got cravings constantly. And so, that's how I was through my whole pregnancy too. You get these cravings that come out of nowhere at 3 a.m. and you have to have it. And so, that plays a big part in this. And Josie's voice is my voice. Her appetite is my appetite.
That's great. And I love in your bio, I could tell by your bios that this is just going to be so much fun. I love how it says that you hate cooking but love to eat. I mean, that's so great. Annie, how about you? Any similarities between you and Fallon?
A little bit. She loves to read self-help books, and I love self-help books. She actually is a chocolatier, and she loves making chocolate, but I don't make chocolate and I love to eat it. So that's, and she loves shoes and I do too. But as far as personality, Fallon's a little bit too she's more of a worrywart, more so than I am. But I liked exploring that. Like, what would it feel like if I worried more about all of these things? And her life is a lot more chaotic than mine, although mine has been, but not as much as hers. So there's just a little bit, but yeah, we're not exactly the same.
just so you know, I'm a recovering shoeaholic, and I should have one of those little medals. But we'll talk about that another time. Julie, you and Holly, what are the similarities?
I'm sure this is a family show, so I'm not going to say the actual word, but we're both F-ups. Like it was almost nice to write somebody that was more of an F-up than I often feel I am. So there's definitely that in common. I often have to tell people though, that there's a lot of similarities in my book to the life that I'm living, but what I think that might be because there's universal themes that I think a lot of people would recognize. There's a character in the story, Mary Margaret St. James, that I deliberately turned the volume up on, deliberately used her as a device of satire. And there's no one in my life that is like Mary Margaret. That part, for the people who live locally, who are reading, who lived in my town or go to my schools where my kids go, there's no one that is like that. But I think that there's elements of that type of a person in all of us. I think that archetypally, there's ways. This is a character that can often make others feel bad, or is kind of, she's in her own pursuit of perfection and making a lot of demands on others, and all is not what it seems in her life. And so I was looking for universal truths inside of characters to make sure that this could resonate with readers. But I would say similarities between Holly and I is that we both, on a daily basis, I mean, she's a mess up, which is why I think it would be comforting to have her sit beside me, and she's hopefully very relatable, because sometimes it's hard to get through the day.
That character, that's such an important character, and I think all of you probably have that person who's always looks perfect, the Lululemon and the expensive coffee, and a lot of work. The way she, yes, we know we can bounce a quarter off your butt cheeks. Now please put some clothes on and stop making the rest of us feel bad. Yeah. So So Emma, I think definitely, I love your little, you have a tagline that says something like this this book may or may not be based on true events. So I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, Saoirse is Irish. She lives in London. She's a writer, but other than that, there's absolutely no crossover whatsoever. No, of course there is, and I do tend to write from experience I've had myself. I find it easier to write from experience and then exaggerate wildly in other areas, but there is, I think the problem with that is that there are areas of, parts of Saoirse's character that simply aren't, pure fiction. But sadly, the people that know me, because I write as I talk, like many of the rest of you have been saying, will automatically make associations between me or my daughter or one of my daughters, or they'll be like, oh yeah, that's the older one, is it? And you're like, oh my God, and it makes you feel, or my husband, and makes you feel like instantly self-conscious about it. So I absolutely hate other people, like people I know very well, reading my books, because they're like, oh Emma, like this is just you, and I'm like, it's not just me, it's like cacophony of other stuff going on, So as I much prefer to, like, if someone close to me says, oh, I just read your book, oh, like what are they thinking, but I think the self-consciousness is very much brought into Saoirse's character, and how she deals with or probably doesn't go very well with kind of snide comments from other mums, or that a lot of that stuff is quite real in terms of just, oh right, would you give him that for tea, or would you bring that snack to school? It's like, I have no problem with how everybody else wants to raise the children. That's fine, but just don't comment how other people do it. And that was kind of so that is basically Saoirse, but Saoirse's too afraid to really say anything, as you would in real life. So she has more of an internal voice, which, as I say, is wonderfully cathartic when you're trying to have a rant.
Yeah, and that's that inner voice that you have your character, and so that we know exactly what your character is feeling, and we'll touch on that. Lisa, how about you? What are the similarities between you and Ginny, if any?
So Ginny and I both had the experience of moving into a new town. So that is something that I brought from myself into the book. I moved around a lot when I was a kid and an adult. So I have the experience of trying to fit into existing social circles more than one time. And, spoiler alert, it didn't always work out, so we have that in common. We do have in common that she's an artist. Ginny's an artist. She's a painter, and she paints pet portraits. And while I'm not an artist, I come from a family of artists and writers. And so I have a lot of her experiences were based on her artistic experiences were based on family members. My mother was a potter, and she used to spend a lot of weekends at craft fairs, traveling around to different craft fairs, which Ginny does a lot. And both of my sisters are painters, and one of my sisters is a pet portrait artist. So I got, to grab a lot of that from them. But Ginny and I differ a lot in that while we both make a ton of mistakes, like Julie was saying, I think Ginny got all the good lines. So she's a lot cleverer and a lot better spoken, and can stand up for herself a lot better than I do. So
it's so funny. And I think, and like you, I'm an empty nester. I lie about my age, but I actually am old enough to be an empty nester. But I think, and my kids will remind me of things that I've said that, I say, I never fed my kids frozen chicken nuggets or fish sticks. And my daughter's like, are you kidding? That's what we ate every Monday night. And it's just kind of like, I don't know. You just sort of, they kind of remind you of things that you didn't even know or remember that you did. So funny. But okay, so I think we're talking about, there are a lot of universal truths about motherhood. And so what is one truth about motherhood that you were hoping to convey in your writing? Annie, let's start with you.
Well, no one ever tells you, I think we've talked about this, no one ever tells you how hard motherhood is. You're not trained for it. You are just thrown into it and you have no idea what to expect. And as a mother, a first-time mother, I was so overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, the sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the just everything that goes, how do I feed the child? I don't know. I mean, what do they need now? Why are they crying? And I just wanted that to come across in my book, that it is not easy. And I wanted other mothers to feel relatable to Fallon, and that they see her messy life, they see her failures, and just see themselves in Fallon and realize that it's not always, I know people, I hate when people say this, but it's not always going to be this bad, that motherhood is rewarding, but you do have to go through some very overwhelming times. At least I did. And I'm thinking that other mothers have as well. So.
They absolutely have. I was just talking to, I actually have two much younger siblings who are now having babies. So I have a big Italian family. We've got people of every age in the family. And I was saying, it's amazing that you buy a TV and there are pages and pages and pages of instructions, like for setting it up and all of the things together. But yet they will hand you a human and say, take this home. Good luck. No instructions.
Yeah.
Stephanie, how about you? What is one truth about motherhood that you hope we can all get from your book?
Well, I would say that mostly that, things don't always go according to our plans, but that doesn't mean that it can't be beautiful. I think we all go into it with this plan of how we're going to do it from start to finish, and how our kids are going to turn out and what it's going to be like along the journey. And it never goes that way. But, I've got a scene where, things are going wrong. Josie goes in for her ultrasound. She's fighting with her mother, and then she sees that little baby up on the screen, and like everything calms down for just a moment. And so I think that, our kids are amazing, and they can they can calm the storm that goes on around us.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Julie, how about you?
Well, one, I would say to anybody thinking about reading inside the genre, realizing something that we've already discussed, is that you don't know what to do with this baby that you bring home from the hospital. You have to keep it alive and feed it and put it to bed. And then, oh, by the way, a couple years down the road, it needs to be educated. It needs to learn how to read. It needs to graduate. It's got to do all of these different things. And so with these books, you always have a journey. You can pop in on any book in any mother's life and relive or re-see, being pregnant or home with a baby, or starting kindergarten, or struggles in high school, or, whatever level, grandmothers watching their daughters become mothers to their grandchildren. So there's lots of complexities, and these are characters that are always having to learn, because just as you figure one thing out in childhood, they're on to the next thing, and there's a whole nother thing you need to learn about whatever developmental phase your child is going through. And the crazy thing about it, I think that's why there's a lot of judgment amongst mothers, is because they're all learning, and part of their figuring out if I'm doing it okay, if I'm not doing it okay, is based on if somebody else, comparing yourself, kind of like grading yourself against how other people are doing it, because we're all trying to figure out where we are on the continuum of whether we're pulling it off or not. Final thought.
Oh, go ahead.
Final thought is it's always in a group situation. The group dynamics of the family brings a lot of complexities. You step into the school system, you're suddenly having to do this in front of hundreds of people in a school system. There's a lot of really great stuff inside of these books. This whole genre is a really great place. And you don't have to be a mother to enjoy these books any more than you have to be a 12-year-old boy wizard to enjoy Harry Potter.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And it is so true. We kind of measure how we're doing by comparing ourselves to how others are doing. That's what I was kind of saying before. It's sort of that, we always feel like somebody's doing it better. So I think that's an important part of your writing, that we really do have to roll with it and give yourself some grace. Emma, how about you?
I think the big message I want to get across is that there's no code to be cracked. Don't think that you are going to be the first person to crack the code. And I think that's the trap that everyone falls into. Oh, well, I won't be like her. Oh, I'll be like this because I'm really calm in real life. So this isn't going to change anything. And I mean, I fell into that, not the calmness thing, obviously, but there were certain preconceptions I had where I thought, oh, well, she's only going bananas because of this. And then you realize, oh, right, we're all in the same boat. And I think the other message I want to get across is don't underestimate the impact it has on your relationships and your family dynamics, because, it's not you that just changes, it's everyone around you that changes, because you have, somebody else, whether it's your husband or your mother or your sister or any of your siblings that have a different viewpoint or a different perception, or maybe went through different experiences themselves, or whatever it is. But all that also plays into how you cope, and and just expecting that change, rather than, I suppose, thinking that and accepting it, rather than thinking that you can just power through the same way you always have when you tackled other difficult situations, is sort of setting yourself up for a fall. So I think that's just just roll with it, and get good friends around you. I think is probably the best way of getting through it.
Yeah, and it's such a good point that it does, motherhood, and it has an effect on every relationship in your life. It's not just that dynamic of now I'm a mother. It affects every other relationship. That's such a great point. Lisa, how about you? What would you say on this?
So I think the thing that I would like, to have people take away from this book is very similar to what everyone's saying. But I come at it from a different angle. So what I want you to know is that no mother is perfect, no matter how hard you try. And so I left a sort of high-powered, high-paying corporate type job to become a full-time mom, because I thought my nanny had a much better job than I did. She called me at the office one day when my son was, just really tiny, and she said, "Oh, he just rolled over," and I missed it. And I was like, "Damn it, she definitely has." Excuse me, sorry. Oops, sorry guys. She's having more fun than I am. I'm doing that. So I left that, but I took my next job, which was now mom, so damn seriously. I back in the day, I was my kids were younger earlier. We had this concept called super mom. Everybody had to be a super mom, and you didn't, you went at it as if it's your job and you were getting paid for it, and you didn't complain, and you didn't make mistakes, and you didn't ask for help. And I took that all really seriously, to the point where I almost drove myself into the ground trying to be the best at this job of anyone who ever took this job. And guess what, guys? I screwed it up. I mean, I screwed up here, there, and everywhere. And I just think that that's what I want whenever I write about moms. That's what I want, to portray. We have the best intentions, but that doesn't mean the outcome. My kids are great, by the way. My kids are all grown up. They're fantastic. They came out well. All those things I did, however I screwed them up wasn't, terrible. But I just think we got to cut ourselves some slack. Yeah. Is really what it boils down to.
I would say that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying hard to do in the moment.
Yes.
You really want to get it right. But
I always say my kids turned out great despite my being the one who raised them. So this has been so. I wish we had another hour. But I want to end. I want to ask you, and maybe you feel like you've already answered this, and some of you have already. This has been such a great discussion. Is there any advice that you would give to new moms? And I feel like a lot of you have already touched on that, but anybody who wants to go, what advice would you give to new moms?
Well, I think Lisa hit the nail on the head when she said ask for help. And it was the one thing I didn't do, because I thought it was a total failure. I was like, if I can't handle one child by myself, then what's why am I here? And I absolutely drove myself into the ground. And then I had another one exactly 2 years later, and I had a toddler and a baby, and I thought, wow, this is, it'll be fine, because she's walking and talking, and even though they're both in nappies and both doing naps, and yet still the pride wouldn't slip. And then eventually I had to admit the fact that I actually needed some extra support, and and that was great. But I think there's a real draw. It's kind of a stigma, isn't it, to put yourself in a vulnerable position and reach out and say, look, could you just give me a hand? And of course, everybody's happy to help. Everybody.
Sure.
Who doesn't love being asked to help, to give a hand?
Exactly.
And I think you need to get over that, before,
Right.
before.
Does anyone else want to add to that? Before I definitely want to make sure we get to that. You can show us your books again and tell us how we can find you and find your books. Does anybody? Go ahead, Lisa.
I just want to add one thing. I am so far from new mom's, new mom place, but I just want to say everything's going to be fine. They're going to work. They're going to be great. Every decision seemed so important when my kids were little, and what side they laid on and what food they ate and whatever, and what enrichment they got. And you know what? And my parents would say to me, they're going to be fine. And I absolutely wouldn't listen to them. And I don't think any new moms who are going to be listening to this are going to listen to me. But I'm just telling you, everyone's going to be fine.
I'm here to tell you, if they don't get tummy time every day, they're going to be fine. They're going to be just fine.
Right.
So I definitely want to, because I don't want to run out of time, and I want everyone to be able to find these wonderful books. I've already read one. I have one. I've ordered some of the others. Annie, your book just came out. So please tell us again the title of your book and where we can find it.
Okay, it's called The Friendship Breakup, and you can find me on anniecathryn.com. And the book is anywhere books are sold. Your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org. So I hope you pick it up. And if you do, write a review and let me know what you thought.
Absolutely. Stephanie?
All right. My book is The Unplanned Life of Josie, Hale. You can find me at stephanieeding.com, and I've got the links to where you can get the book anywhere books are sold, or you can contact me on Facebook, email. I'm on Instagram and Twitter.
Beautiful. Julie?
Holly Banks Full of Angst and The Peculiar Fate of Holly Banks. Everything you need to know about me is on my website, julievalerie.com. And this has been a wonderful experience. I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. Emma?
Okay, so it's a trilogy in this order. So we have, that's wrong. I'm all over the place because it's mirrored. Anyway, so it's Time Out. This is the Juggle, ironically enough, juggling my books and winging it. And you can go to my website, which is emmamurray.net, or you can go to Amazon. And I'm in the UK, so if you're passing in Waterstones, then you can grab a copy, and other online bookstores as well. So please leave a review.
Great. Lisa?
So my book is Welcome to the Neighborhood. Let me just kind of get it at an angle. My website is lisarowe.com, where you will find buy links to the book. You can really get it anywhere you buy books, the same as everybody else's. And you can also follow me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram every day making up some kind of nonsense. So it's at Lisa Rowe Writes on Instagram. Come join me and watch my craziness. And also, I'd love a review. If you read the book and enjoy it, leave me a review. That would be awesome. Love to hear it.
You are great on Instagram, by the way. So everybody, please go and find and buy these books. I know I will. And again, yes, leave a review. That's one of the nicest things that you could do for an author. So this has been so fun, so wonderful. I wish we had more time. But again, I'm Lee Bukowski. I am the author of A Week of Warm Weather. I hope you'll check that out and leave me a review if you like it. If you don't like it, you don't have to bother leaving a review. You're very busy to do that. But also, I would like to invite you tonight. One of our fellow Bookish Road Trip tour guides, Barbara Connery, has her book club tonight. She's going to be interviewing Mary Simon Rothstein to discuss her book, Crazy to Leave You. So maybe you'll tune in for that. But again, thank you so much to all of you. This has been wonderful. And I look forward to reading all of your books. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lee. Awesome job. Yay.